The following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. The content of the following The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. The content of the following program, including all statements from the hosts and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by the host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program shall not be viewed as substitute for a personal consultation with an attorney. Now, prepare yourself to be informed and entertained by Gus Bravo and Neil Kotze, two AV-rated trial lawyers who have been practicing law for a combined total of nearly 40 years. For the next 30 minutes, they will share their insight and commentary on important legal issues affecting all of us.
After a long day at work, a young lawyer goes to a bar. And he walks in the bar and he looks around and he spots a very, very attractive blonde woman sitting in the corner. Nice. So he walks over to the blonde woman and he sits down and she stares him right in the eye and says, "I'll screw anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place, anytime you want." And he looks at her and he says, "Really? What law firm do you work for?" Welcome to Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. My name's Neil Kotze.
And I'm Gus Bravo. But do we know, is she really a lawyer? She could be a lawyer, right?
She might not be a lawyer, but that could be a giveaway. So,
well, look, we're going to do something different because we always start to be so fresh and stuff. We got to come clean. This is not live. I know for those of you
not
that
dead.
Well, we'll see. Remains to be seen.
That remains to be seen. Okay.
So we've decided to pre-record a couple of these. Now I have two versions of why. Okay. My first version is I want you to picture like my voice sounding like a James Earl Jones voice. I was going to ask you to close your eyes, but I think that would get a little weird. Yeah. And then cue in the Space Odyssey 2001 music, and you hear the voice saying, the five of you have spoken. And we have listened. The feedback from our value and loyal fan base that what works. All kidding aside, though, we've gotten some positive feedback. Okay, so that's option A. Option B was the real reason why we're doing this is because I took a pretty long extended vacation and I'm going to go back to Ohio, and you don't want to have to drive here on separate occasions with your blow up.
The blow-up doll I have of Gus that I keep at home. Yes.
I was hoping you weren't going to confirm that fact. So obviously, either one, pick your poison. That's why we are pre-recording this. Okay, but I said earlier that,
and I would say I'll interrupt you though because I think one of the reasons we came up with the idea too was that there's been so many hot button topics in the recent news and
yes.
related to legal issues that we could put together a 1-hour show talking about those, pre-recorded, while it's fresh on our minds. And we're going to do this for an hour, and so the second show will carry that over. But
so
I think
you might see a wardrobe change, but that's meaningless.
Yes, that's a lot better than people watching this seeing a wardrobe malfunction when it comes to you or me. At least me, no one wants to see a wardrobe malfunction.
I'm not
but
too
a
far
wardrobe
behind.
change. But yes, so there's a lot of things that we are going to talk about I think are very important and relevant and interesting.
Yeah, and I was joking earlier about the 5. We have more than 5 listeners.
Up to 15.
Absolutely. But all kidding aside, the people that have watched our show and have, praised us for what we're doing, it's not really about what we talk about, but rather I think it's just the dialogue, the conversation you and I have. And for those who are new and haven't watched this before, we don't rehearse any of this. This is completely impromptu. You have no idea what I'm going to say
exactly.
at all, right? I don't even know the joke, and you don't know the quote of the day that we do at the end of the shows. And we think that that dynamic works because we've tried it before where we've actually rehearsed it and it's just felt like, a little too stiff. And so I think one of the things is we're starting to realize is really what really works is we'll see you'll hear what I have to say and vice versa, and we'll follow a couple of topics and see where that takes us.
Absolutely. And just like it is in the office in many ways. Yeah.
That's true. So lead us off. What's the first topic that we want to talk about?
Well, I think it's a combination, really, of three. I mean, because there's so many hot-button topics, and we could probably figure out how they all interrelate to one another. But you obviously have, and we've already talked about this a little bit, is the Supreme Court ruling that came out on gay marriage.
Right.
You have the issues that have been in the media now for several weeks related to the Confederate flag. And we have some women's rights issues related to your favorite topic, sports. And we've been talking about the disparity between the women's soccer. I think you told me that the men's soccer team that won the FIFA Cup got like 30.
I believe, and don't quote me on these figures, please, but I know that it's a high discrepancy. The German national men's soccer team for winning the 2014 World Cup took home something like $36 million, whereas the U.S. Female team took home $2 million from FIFA. So it's a huge disparity.
Exactly. And so a lot of those issues relate to, I think you and I have talked about, morality and the law. And do
Correct.
the two automatically have to intertwine? Do they not? Sometimes they don't,
and
sometimes
if
they
you
do.
think about so many, and some people would argue practically all, right? I'm sure every single law that's out there in the quote-unquote books, we don't have books anymore, really. Oh, we do. I've seen some books in your office, actually. But every single law out there has some morality as its undertone, right? As some kind of basis for why we decided to make that legal or illegal, or dictate behavior.
Absolutely.
That's what laws are. It's just dictating behavior. So we thought it was interesting that we've had monumental changes that have taken place in such a short period of time. I'm talking about social changes, and most of those, as we'll talk about, but a few of those really have very little to do with the law. The law really has no place in that, although people want to try to fit it somewhere. But we can use it as an example of really more of a political, social, let that avenue take its course, but don't implicate the law. And when the law does get involved and when it shouldn't. So I think, listen, everything, law and morality, we can spend hours. So be careful, we might spend hours.
Exactly. And so as you look at those three topics, and I think we've already spent some time, of those three, we've talked a little bit, I think we had a show, we talked primarily about the U.S. Supreme Court decision on gay marriage.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about soccer. We really haven't talked about the flag issue much
at
all.
I took the liberty of getting a picture of the Confederate flag, and hopefully that'll be coming up here real soon. So I think that's a great topic to start off with, because it represents what I said earlier, which is there's very little the law can and should do, but it still has, you have to monitor and see, and we can talk about
For example, and as the flag is coming up, I mean, this is a very interesting issue when you deal with, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, as a young Jew in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a lot of African-American friends, because we would congregate together because there was a lot of discrimination in the South in the early 70s when I was a child.
70s.
Well, I was born in the 60s, but I was still wasn't old enough.
I was curious which decade was going to be chosen.
I was alive when the Brown versus Board of Education decision came out.
You didn't dare say 80s. Although 80s would have applied because you graduated from high school.
I was still in high school in the 80s.
Yeah,
I graduated in 84. But
I would have jumped all over that one.
I know. So I had to go with 70s, which is fair. But the Confederate flag, even over the years, has certainly taken on a meaning. And as a Jew, I mean, I have to equate it in some ways with the swastika. Now, what's interesting is there's a difference between the United States and Germany. There are a lot of differences. Germany's actually banned it because German law doesn't have the free speech rights in Germany that we have in the United States. Legally, the question, I guess, is could the United States or could the state of South Carolina choose to actually ban the flag? I think that would be a very tough legal decision. They certainly have the right to change it and not use it as their state flag. They certainly have the right to remove it from wherever they want to remove it from.
And why is that? In a simple answer, why can't the state legislate that? Why can't they pass a law that says, you cannot show that flag, display that flag. I mean, I know the answer, but
Right. I cannot think of an example in the United States where a visual image has been banned, other than pornography. You can't display that in public areas.
I always when I hear that. Don't worry. This is a
You're not
PG
going down the
show.
wrong
This is a
path.
PG show.
Right.
It reminds me of there was an HBO movie about Muhammad Ali, and you know how Muhammad Ali challenged. You know, he didn't want to. He get drafted for Vietnam, and he actually challenged it in the courts, and it went all the way up to a pretty prominent Supreme Court. It was about his freedom of religion, because I had just converted to Islam, and felt that his beliefs, religious beliefs, war was against his beliefs. And so they have, but anyways, they have a picture of the justices during that time also trying to determine what's pornography. Because remember, there was a line where you kind of will know when we see it.
Does it appeal to your prurient interest? I actually remember the
Okay,
quote.
so that's boring. What I wanted to say is they show a clip of the justice in some dark room with one of those movie reels trying to determine where the line is.
Right.
Tough job they had.
Exactly.
But
It's like the police officer who's in charge of doing the sting operation at the strip club. Sorry, honey, I got to work late tonight. Right? It's the same concept. What a tough job that is. But yeah,
speaking of which, I'm kidding. No, I laugh because you know, for those of you, and we'll give a local sports bar plug here. We went to Twin Peaks. I think you can say that,
Right.
Because you're obviously already
very
revealed
interesting club.
It's a sports bar. It's not a club.
Interesting.
It is a sports bar. Make that clear. Okay.
It's a restaurant sports bar. Yes, it is.
Neil, we didn't have to pay anyone at the
Yes,
side
exactly
door.
right.
This is completely on the up
Right,
and up.
right.
All right. No, but what was interesting about it is just you see something new, and it's just completely taken over that plaza. It's very popular.
Yeah.
Obviously, for
The poor ale house next door. There was nobody parked at the ale house.
so
You had to
it's
get parked.
amazing.
It was-
We actually saw Channing Crowder there, and you're
Right.
going to look at me and say, "Who the heck's Channing Crowder?
No, you told me who he was.
Who is he?"
He was the former football player for the Dolphins who now has a radio show that you pointed out to me.
You listened very well.
I pay attention to you every now and
he
then.
actually went to University of Florida, but so I didn't like him then. But he became a Dolphin, so it was interesting. It was good, but it gets into there are issues about imagery and all that stuff that we have to deal with, and so what some people feel comfortable. Some people could go to that restaurant and feel uncomfortable, right? Let's
Right.
be honest. They're not a bunch of naked girls walking around, but it's kind of like Hooters, but for more of a, what would we say, a mountainous or, Neil,
Well, it's an
help
interesting.
me out here.
It's not that. They're just wearing lumberjack type outfits as
Yeah,
opposed
it's like
to
a
the
wilderness motif,
Right, exactly.
right?
Right.
That's all I meant. You're looking
Exactly.
at me like
I'm trying to figure out what you meant by
no,
mountainous.
No,
yeah,
no.
like I'm.
Mountains,
Yeah.
trees,
Right.
rivers,
Exactly.
ice. Okay, so that's all it is. But we could understand if someone says, I don't feel comfortable seeing that or taking that and going to a restaurant. That's fine as well. But there were people with kids there. It's not like something completely improper. No. So
How do we get down this path again?
yeah, there's a reason. There's a
Okay,
reason. Don't
okay.
worry. Don't worry. You're like, get away, get away, get away. So that's an example of what the law allows. So you can't make it illegal to have something like that just because some people feel uncomfortable with it, right? It's really, and that's at the very basis of some of these issues. You could say the Confederate flag, for instance, that it's not a large group. It's not the majority. It's a certain group feels very, very beyond uncomfortable. Let's make it clear.
Yeah.
Very passionate and impassioned about what that symbol means to them.
And I may, and as I'm sitting listening to you, I'm starting to realize I may have even overspoken when I said
Never.
that. Yeah, I do it every now and then. It's not that Congress or maybe a state legislature could not actually pass a law banning it. I'm not sure a state could. I have to take that back. Could the federal government ban the Confederate flag or use thereof? And you would have an interesting First Amendment issue because things are banned in this country. Is tobacco advertising? You can't advertise
Yeah, but
cigarettes and
you're
magazines.
dealing correct because
So there are pornography is banned in public.
right. What's
so-
just my example? Why I got
Yeah.
to the Twin Peaks example because clearly that's not pornography. That's not a strip club. None of that. But I can understand how people will feel uncomfortable. But just because it makes people uncomfortable doesn't mean the law should step in and ban it. Although they can, you're right. There are instances where society feels so strongly about something that it says we need to have that as either a protection
Exactly.
or an expansion.
But I think that there's a difference between saying we're just going to ban it, no one can ever use it, and a state saying we choose not to let this be our flag anymore. And we choose we're not going to
Are you
display
going to give
this
me the
flag.
states' rights argument?
Well, no. I'm just saying the state had the
By
right.
the way, one of the things we're going to try to navigate these potentially treacherous waters, politically treacherous waters, because we want to avoid, and I say, all can aside, we don't want this to become a political debate about
I'm talking legally.
who's right, who's
Exactly.
wrong.
No, in fact, I think the state did the right thing.
I noticed
by
I
removing
pointed
it.
myself when I said right, and I said pointed to you when I said wrong.
Actually, we're coming up, I think, on our 15-minute spot, so we probably need to take a break.
And you
and
can
we
tell
will revisit.
this is we're completely thrown off. It's like 10:30 in the morning, still working on our coffee. So we'll get better as the show comes along. You're listening to Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil.
Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil is being brought to you by the law offices of Neil D. Codsey and Bravo Law. Bravo Law is a business litigation firm known for providing common sense solutions to small businesses and individuals throughout South Florida. Mr. Bravo is rated AV by Martindale-Hubbell and Superb by AVVO, the highest ratings available from these two entities. The law offices of Neil D. Codsey is a litigation boutique with offices in Broward and Miami-Dade counties. Mr. Codsey is a veteran trial lawyer with nearly 25 years of jury trial experience. He is also a two-time recipient of the South Florida Daily Business Review's Most Effective Lawyer Award, a recipient of numerous awards for providing pro bono legal services, and has been recognized by the National Law Council. Call our office, 786-464-0841 or 954-790-6711 and get informed. You're listening to Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. If you have a comment, question, or just want to contribute to the conversation, call the show at 888-565-1470 and share your thoughts on what's going on. Now, back to Gus and Neil for more Attorney Confidential.
And we're back with Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. So far, our show, which, again, warning, it is pre-recorded show.
Yeah, so all you people who are dying to call in, you'll have to wait until we do our next live show.
You can always tweet us, Facebook us, and try. We're trying to get more active in social media.
Gus's cell number is... you can text
Not
Gus.
that far.
Yeah.
Please.
No.
Although, listen, I give clients, most of my clients, my cell phone. Hopefully the clients that are listening who I have not given my cell phone out to don't take it personal. Right. But nowadays, I mean, look, I have my phone right here, and
exactly.
I know yours is
it's the same.
Yours is in your holster.
It's in my holster, yes.
So we've been talking about law and morality and the interplay between that and how. I mean, again, we could, like we said earlier, we could spend hours and hours, but the three kind of social issues that we're focusing on now is the obviously Confederate flag we're talking about so far, gay marriage, and then also the Title IX, which is exemplified by the U.S. women's national team and becoming the first female team to have a ticker tape parade.
And I'll digress on the title. We'll shift from the flag discussion to Title IX. I'm sure we'll get back to the flag a little bit later.
There is no method. You just throw it out there.
Because one of the things I was thinking about just the other night, ESPN has this great series where they show the top 20 of a category. Who's number one, they call it. So who's number one? What's the best sports team in history? And I think the Dolphins' undefeated team ranked, they may have been number one, but it was up there when they did that show.
I mean, I'm a Dolphin fan. It's a great team. I wouldn't put them number one.
Who's number one? Coaches. Who's number one? NCAA basketball programs, whatever. They have all these. And the other night they had who's number one in coaches for all sports, college and professional.
But U.S.
United States.
Yeah.
It was limited to the United States. And as I'm watching this, I'm thinking the disparity between women's and men's athletics as who they're ranking are the number one coaches. Because I'm a basketball fan, both men's and women's, as well as a soccer fan, both men's and women's. And for those of you that are familiar with Pat Summitt at Tennessee, it's just a tragedy what she's going through health-wise, but in my opinion, the best college basketball coach, and I'll say that over Dean Smith even, that she has taken a team
Over
in
John
history.
Wooden too.
John Wooden, it's close, but she's really.
I mean, she gets it over Adolph Rupp because he had an unfortunate
Remember,
first name.
I think that the only difference between Summitt and Wooden, which makes it interesting, is Wooden was at a time where the talent was so limited and he had such a pool of it that it was possible for a team in the male game to win, to dominate. I don't think you'll ever see that again, and I don't think that's through the fault of coaching. Pat Summitt was a coach in much later era when women's basketball had already taken on, and she did it without necessarily top talent. She
it's
actually
splitting
gelled,
hairs.
Right.
It's Pele or Maradona
it's like
for the soccer
I was always
guys.
impressed with what Billy Donovan did at Florida because he had talent, but he gelled a team together and they had better chemistry.
Okay, I'm not
going to
let you talk about the Gators on my part of the show.
Pat Summitt, we can debate where she falls, but she was like 19 or 20 on the list, which I think is a travesty. And there were other coaches. Bobby Knight was put ahead of Pat Summitt.
Right.
I don't agree with that, and I have my own criticisms of Bobby Knight and other coaches. But then going to women's soccer, Anson Dorrance, who has won more national championships than any other college coach in any sport. I think we talked earlier, showed the University of North Carolina women's soccer team has won like 20 out of the last 30 or so. It's ridiculous. Was not on the list. And you had all these coaches that were on the list. Where do you draw the line? And so it's a women.
Yeah, I think it's
Pat
also,
Summitt was the only coach of a women's team that wasn't.
It's also a byproduct. You said this was on ESPN.
Yeah,
it's a byproduct of just the types of sports that are more popular. I mean, basketball is still more popular here in this country than soccer in general. Because
but the wrestling coach from Iowa,
yeah,
how popular? He was number 4.
No, but again, these are especially collegiate. College soccer has not had any kind of following whatsoever. The only following of soccer in this country has mostly been of the national teams when they play every 4 years of the World Cup, which we've been pretty consistent in the U.S. about following them, especially since '94 World Cup here in this country. Every year the U.S. following has increased but been pretty steady. The professional soccer league is just starting to gain some traction. So among just popularity, soccer has not made it on television for years. As a matter of fact, soccer would have to pay to get on TV.
Exactly, and that takes us to the whole Title IX issue with respect to the.
But here's an interesting question about the example of Pat Summitt and Anson Dorrance. What's interesting to me listening to it is, we have a female coach who was on the list, but a male coach of a female team was not. So in some ways, that is progress, right?
Interesting. And that goes to the popularity. And more people know Pat Summitt.
You could
than Anson Dorrance.
argue, as I agree with you, that it just look purely on bios and number of titles that Anson Dorrance has a better record of collegiate success than Pat Summitt, right? So
absolutely. So
it's kind of progress that she jumps him. Why? Because of the popularity of the sport, rather than I think the gender. But which is a nice, I think, segue to what Title IX is. And we had a picture of Title IX. I took the liberty of pulling up a Sports Illustrated cover page from 1972 that basically had the language of Title IX, which, frankly, I've been a Sports Illustrated fan for since I can remember, and I don't ever recall a law being on the cover of the sports page.
Interesting. Yeah, Freddie, if you're in the studio.
If not, we'll add it later. So this is the point where we say, wow, Gus, what a great picture.
Yeah.
Please.
Wow, Gus, what a great picture. But I'm not looking at it, but nonetheless, hopefully if it doesn't pop up, we'll go back and talk about it.
What's interesting about, again, Title IX is, for those of you that don't know, it essentially basically said you cannot discriminate on the basis of gender, particularly when it comes to athletics, because up until that point, the NCAA, there was a disparity between how much money the colleges would devote to women's sports over male sports.
Absolutely, and that becomes an issue because some schools don't have certain male sports programs because they don't have the funding equally.
Right.
For example,
unintended consequences of a good law.
I mean,
that's Title IX too, in a lot of ways.
In some ways, the perfect example is the University of Miami, South Florida. A lot of Latino people in South Florida where soccer is a very
I'm not
popular
sure I
sport.
like the way you just said Latino. I
Okay,
felt
Latin Americans. I'm so sorry, but you know
No, I'm
exactly.
kidding.
But you would expect University of Miami to have a men's soccer program, and they don't because of Title IX.
And I'll take it a step further. University of Miami used to have one of the elite men's diving and swimming programs in the country.
You would think South
Greg,
Florida's swimming.
you ever heard of Greg Louganis?
Yeah, that
He
name
came
sounds
from the
familiar.
University of Miami. And so they had a spectacular program because, like you were going to say, you would think that being down here, maybe good for swimming and diving. So that program was actually a victim of Title IX because the university did not have enough funds to fund all these sports. And so
No.
when it came time to choosing, they had to comply. They had to have some female sports survive, and while other men's sports, obviously the ones that are not the revenue producers, didn't. Football, for example, it counts as 3 or 4 teams, as it should, because they may have the 85-man scholarship. Well, we're getting our 1-minute warning. It seems kind of early, I guess. I don't know how much time we're getting, but we'll take them at their word. They're going to cut us off, I guess. Neil, the takeaway of this,
the takeaway
this
is
really long show.
listen to us next week, although we're going to actually be recording in about 10 minutes.
We'll
but
get
listen
better
to us
next
next
one.
week where we're going to continue talking about these very issues, the women's sports, some more about the flag and gay marriage and some of these social issues and how they impact the law. So, Freddie, if you're there, you
Well,
can put up the
I will put
deep thought.
I will take the deep thought upon myself since I don't know if it's going to make it on the page. And I got this from Henry Ford, who said, "When everything seems to be going against you, remember that the airplane takes off against the wind, not with it." Henry Ford. So,
Designer of the Edsel, yes.
Encouragement.
Right.
Maybe we'll get better as we go along, and maybe the show will actually be a little longer too.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay. This has been Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil,
Thank you.
pre-recorded. All right, thank you.
You have been